Something is living inside you right now, not metaphorically, not as a figure of speech, literally, biologically, physically living inside your body at this exact moment. And it has been there, quietly, for longer than you probably want to admit. It is stealing iron directly out of your blood. It is dumping its toxic waste products into your intestine around the clock, every hour, every day, without interruption. It is wrecking your skin from the inside out in ways that no dermatologist's prescription has ever been able to fully explain. And it is grinding your nervous system down so slowly, so methodically, that you have learned to attribute every single symptom to stress, to bad sleep, to aging, to just the way your body works now. The medical system, the same system that charges you for every appointment, every prescription, every follow-up visit, every specialist referral, has almost no financial incentive to stop and walk you through what I'm about to tell you. And that is not a conspiracy. That is just economics. According to the World Health Organization, approximately 1.5 billion people are currently infected with soil-transmitted helminths. That is the clinical term for worms that enter the human body through contaminated soil, through food, through surfaces that billions of people touch every single day. Globally, the total burden of intestinal parasitic infections exceeds 3.5 billion people, with hundreds of thousands of deaths recorded annually. Those are not numbers pulled from a naturopath's blog or a wellness influencer's Instagram page. Those are the WHO's own published figures. And I want you to sit with what they actually mean for a moment. More than 1 in 5 people on this planet is currently hosting an intestinal parasite that is actively, measurably damaging their health right now as you read this. If you believe that modern hygiene has made this a non-issue in wealthy, developed countries, if you are sitting there thinking this is a problem for other places, other people, not for someone like you living the kind of life you live, I want to dismantle that assumption completely, because it is the first and most dangerous myth that keeps people sick for years. If this is new information for you, if something about what you just read made your stomach drop a little, do this right now. Hit subscribe to Dr. Michael Carter and tap like on this video. The healthcare system does not get paid to keep you healthy. It gets paid when you are sick, confused, and dependent on the next prescription. This channel is built on exactly the opposite principle. Help us grow. Subscribe, hit like, and tell me in the comments what city or country you are watching from. Let's build something real together. I have spent 15 years in clinical practice watching patients move from doctor to doctor, carrying fatigue, unexplained skin conditions, chronic digestive complaints, and mood instability, and getting handed symptom management for every single one of those problems without anyone stopping to ask a more fundamental question: what is actually disrupting the biological environment inside this person's body? Parasitic infections are among the most underdiagnosed contributors to chronic illness in everyday adult patients. The reason they stay underdiagnosed is partly biological. Parasites are extraordinarily good at hiding, and partly structural. A 15-minute insurance-billed appointment does not leave much room for a thorough parasitology discussion. So let me give you now what 15 years of clinical practice tells me you genuinely need to hear. Let's begin by completely dismantling the myth of modern sterility. You may wash your hands 20-30 times a day. You may soak every bunch of herbs, every vegetable in clean water before it touches your cutting board. You may spray every kitchen surface with high concentration antibacterial cleaner. These are genuinely good habits. Hygiene matters enormously, and you should keep doing all of it. But here is the biological reality that no amount of hand washing fully addresses. Parasite eggs are among the most environmentally durable objects in all of nature. Their outer shells, called egg capsules or cysts depending on the species, are chemically resistant to most disinfectants at household concentrations. They survive for weeks and months on everyday surfaces, handrails on public transit, soil tracked in on shoes, the fur of domestic animals that go outdoors, and yes, the surface of paper money, which changes hands thousands of times. This is not a rural problem. It is not a developing country problem. These organisms exist in the environment of every city, every neighborhood, and every household in the developed world. The American Academy of Family Physicians documents meaningful prevalence of pinworm, giardia, hookworm, and intestinal amoeba infections across the United States. These are not exotic tropical diseases. They are here in your environment continuously. The key insight I need you to internalize is this: the right question is no longer whether parasite eggs enter your body. They do, periodically, for virtually everyone. The right question is what happens after they arrive, and that is entirely determined by the state of your internal defenses. A healthy, well-functioning digestive system destroys the vast majority of incoming parasite eggs before they can establish a foothold. High gastric acid, the concentrated hydrochloric acid in your stomach, burns through the outer layers of many eggs and larvae before they can progress. Concentrated, free-flowing bile from a healthy gallbladder acts as a powerful natural antiseptic throughout the intestine. Active intestinal motility, the rhythmic muscular contractions that push contents through and out, physically expels organisms before they can anchor. A well-populated gut microbiome, meaning the trillions of beneficial bacteria living in your colon, competes aggressively for the space and resources that parasites need to survive. When all of those systems are operating well, most parasitic exposures resolve without ever producing symptoms. The problem is that for many adults, one or more of those defense layers has been compromised by diet, by stress, by antibiotic use, by age, or by the accumulated damage from prior infections. And that is when the balance shifts. That is when something that should have passed right through you makes itself at home instead. Now I want you to understand what your intestine actually looks like, because this shapes everything about why parasitic infections are so persistent and so difficult to fully clear. Your small intestine alone is approximately 6 meters long, about 20 feet. Your entire gastrointestinal tract, from mouth to rectum, is several meters more. This tube is not smooth. It is deeply folded into circular folds called plicae circulares, and the surface of those folds is covered in millions of tiny finger-like projections called villi. Each one a microscopic absorptive structure designed to maximize surface contact with digested food. The total absorptive surface area of the small intestine, when you account for all these folds and villi, is roughly 250 square meters, the size of a tennis court, folded into your abdomen. Within the recesses of those folds, in the mucus layers that coat the intestinal wall, and in the anatomical pockets formed at the junctions of different bowel segments, parasites find shelter. They anchor, they hide from immune cells, they persist. You cannot sterilize that surface. You cannot flush it clean with a single treatment. Any approach that does not account for the biological complexity of that terrain is going to underperform. And I will explain exactly what that means for treatment strategy in a moment. First, let's go through the clinical symptoms in real depth, because recognizing this pattern in yourself or in your children is the first step toward doing anything meaningful about it. The first and most frequently encountered symptom in my clinical practice is abdominal pain without a clear cause. Not pain that follows a heavy or greasy meal. Not pain associated with a stomach bug. Pain that appears spontaneously, in waves, often described as cramping, twisting, or drilling sensations, localized most commonly around the navel, though it can migrate. It appears suddenly, grips the gut hard for minutes, and then disappears without any intervention, without antispasmodic medication, without doing anything at all. Parents often notice this pattern in children and describe it as the child doubling over briefly and then resuming normal activity as if nothing happened. The mechanism has two components. Large parasites physically traumatize the delicate mucosal lining of the intestinal wall as they move or feed, causing local tissue damage and triggering a pain reflex. Simultaneously, parasites secrete compounds that directly stimulate smooth muscle contraction in the intestinal wall, producing sharp reflex spasm. When parents bring in a child who gets unexplained abdominal pain regularly, and there is no dietary pattern, no infectious cause, no anatomical finding on imaging, parasitic infestation belongs at the top of the differential diagnosis. That is 15 years of clinical pattern recognition talking. The second symptom is one that patients almost never volunteer on their own. I have to ask about it specifically because adults are embarrassed to mention it and parents sometimes do not connect it to anything medical. It is intense itching in the perianal region, around the anus, predominantly at night. The biology here is one of the more remarkable examples of parasitic adaptation in all of medicine, and once you understand it, you will never look at this symptom the same way again. Pinworms, Enterobius vermicularis, are the most prevalent intestinal parasite in high-income countries, with estimates of 2 to 20% prevalence in school-aged children alone. Adult pinworms live in the cecum and colon. The females, after mating, do not deposit their eggs inside the intestine. Instead, they migrate down to the anal canal and emerge through the anus, specifically at night, when the infected person is deeply asleep and the anal sphincter is fully relaxed. The female deposits thousands of eggs on the perianal skin, fixing them in place with a thick, sticky adhesive matrix she secretes specifically for this purpose. It is that foreign adhesive, combined with the mechanical movement of the worm itself on sensitive perianal skin, that triggers intense nerve irritation and the scratching reflex. The infected person begins scratching in their sleep, completely unconsciously, completely reflexively. In that moment, thousands of microscopic eggs transfer directly under the fingernails, where they can survive for up to 3 weeks at normal room temperature. The next morning, the person wakes up, does not wash their hands thoroughly enough, touches their face, bites a fingernail, handles food, and the eggs complete the journey back into the mouth. Larvae hatch in the small intestine, mature in the colon within 2 to 6 weeks, and the entire cycle repeats. This process, reinfecting the same host from themselves, is called autoinfection, and it is the reason pinworm infestations can persist indefinitely in a single individual without any new external exposure. There is also a second reinfection route called retroinfection, where larvae that have just hatched from eggs on the perianal skin re-enter the anus and migrate upward into the colon, restarting the cycle without ever passing back through the mouth. When I see nighttime anal itching in a child, the clinical response is immediate and mechanical. Tight-fitting underwear worn at night, nails cut as short as possible, thorough hand washing with soap immediately upon waking before touching anything. These are not comfort measures. They are evidence-based interruptions of the transmission cycle, and they are as important as any pharmacological treatment. The third major clinical marker is persistent therapy-resistant skin pathology. This is the symptom that sends patients to dermatologists for years, generates prescription after prescription for topical steroids and antihistamines, and never fully resolves because the root cause is not being addressed. Here is the biochemistry. The small intestine is extraordinarily absorptive. Everything present inside that intestinal lumen can and does get absorbed into the bloodstream through the intestinal wall. When a parasite is living in that space, it is continuously releasing metabolic waste products, its own excretions, its shed outer layers, compounds produced by its digestion of your nutrients. These are biologically foreign molecules, and your immune system recognizes them as foreign. They enter the bloodstream, circulate to the liver, your primary detoxification organ, processing everything that comes from the gut before it reaches the rest of the body, and the liver begins working under a chronic toxic load it was not designed to sustain indefinitely. When that load exceeds the liver's processing capacity, the body activates secondary elimination pathways. The skin is the body's largest organ, roughly 2 square meters of surface area, and it functions as a secondary elimination route under conditions of metabolic stress. Toxins that the liver cannot fully process get rerouted toward the skin and excreted through sweat glands and sebaceous glands. The result is inflammation, rash, abnormal dryness, flaking, and persistent itching that does not respond to topical treatments because you are treating the exhaust, not the engine. Chronic skin conditions, neuropathic itch, dry eczema, atopic dermatitis, and psoriatic presentations almost always have a significant internal gut component. The gut and the skin are connected through what immunologists now call the gut-skin axis. Any clinician who is prescribing only topical steroids for a chronic skin condition without investigating the intestinal environment is providing incomplete care. When the underlying intestinal load is addressed, the skin frequently clears in ways that years of dermatological treatment never achieved. The fourth symptom is functional digestive disruption. Bloating, heaviness after meals, intestinal gurgling, alternating constipation and loose stools, and a general sense that your gut simply does not work reliably. You eat clean food, well prepared, good quality, and still feel uncomfortable afterward. There is no obvious food intolerance. There is no structural pathology on imaging. What is happening is that the microbial environment of the intestine has been disrupted. Your gut microbiome, the community of beneficial bacteria that regulate enzyme secretion, motility, and fermentation of fiber, has been destabilized by the presence of parasites and by the inflammatory compounds they release. The physical presence of worms in the intestinal lumen mechanically interferes with normal peristalsis. The wave-like muscular contractions that move food through your digestion are no longer running on your biology alone. Part of that process has been hijacked. The fifth symptom is chronic fatigue. Exhaustion that does not improve with sleep. Fatigue that is present every morning before the day has even started. That makes basic cognitive and physical tasks feel disproportionately effortful. Patients describe it as feeling like the battery never fully charges. The mechanism is dual and compounding. On one side, nutrient theft. The small intestine is where amino acids from protein, fatty acids from fat, glucose from carbohydrates, and micronutrients including iron, zinc, B vitamins, and fat-soluble vitamins are absorbed. Parasites sit precisely in this high absorption zone and intercept those nutrients before your cells can use them. You are eating and digesting food, but a portion of what you absorb is going to fuel organisms that are working against you. On the other side, systemic toxin load. The metabolic waste products of intestinal parasites circulate in your bloodstream continuously. Your immune system mounts a low-grade inflammatory response to those foreign compounds. Inflammation is energetically expensive. It consumes cellular resources that would otherwise go toward normal tissue maintenance and repair. The combined result is a state of chronic metabolic debt. You are spending more than you are taking in at the cellular level every single day. That is what fatigue without a clear cause often is. The sixth clinical domain is neurological and behavioral, and this is where the conversation most urgently needs to happen for parents. Parasites release compounds during their normal metabolism that include substances toxic to nervous tissue. These neurotoxins are absorbed into the bloodstream, cross the blood-brain barrier, and directly affect brain chemistry. The observable results in children include extreme irritability, emotional dysregulation, aggression without clear provocation, inconsolable crying, irrational fears, and night terrors. Vivid, terrifying nightmares that wake children screaming. Children experiencing significant parasitic toxin load often exhibit what parents describe as a changed personality, more reactive, less resilient, harder to comfort. One of the most diagnostically significant nocturnal symptoms in this context is bruxism, grinding the teeth during sleep. The masseter muscles enter involuntary, sustained, high-force contraction during sleep. The sound is audible. The force is sufficient to wear down tooth enamel over time. The current evidence-based interpretation is that systemic neurotoxin load drives excessive motor neuron activity during the reduced inhibitory control of sleep. When a parent mentions that their child grinds their teeth at night, my first question is not about dental alignment. My first question is about the full clinical picture: abdominal pain, perianal itching, skin changes, mood instability, fatigue. Bruxism does not exist in isolation. It is part of a syndrome. The seventh and potentially most medically serious consequence of chronic parasitic infection is nutritional deficiency at the systemic level, and the most dangerous of these is iron deficiency anemia. Anemia means the blood cannot carry adequate oxygen. Hemoglobin, the oxygen-carrying protein inside red blood cells, is present in insufficient quantity. The result is profound weakness, breathlessness on minor exertion, poor concentration, and in children, impaired cognitive development. The parasitic mechanism for causing this is direct and brutal. In heavily infected individuals, daily blood loss from hookworm feeding accumulates into a profound iron deficit that oral iron supplements alone cannot correct, because the source of loss is still active: gray, dull skin, cracking at the corners of the mouth, angular cheilitis, a sign of B vitamin and iron depletion, sunken eyes, hair that breaks easily. Every one of those signs is your body communicating that its reserves are gone and that something is taking far more than is being replaced. If you or your child has iron deficiency anemia that does not respond to oral supplementation, parasitic infection must be on the differential. Treating the deficiency without eliminating its cause is managing the meter while the tap runs. Nobody in a white coat is going to walk you through this at a 15-minute appointment. The billing structure does not support it. The pharmaceutical model does not incentivize it. The system earns more managing your symptoms than resolving your root cause. I'm Dr. Michael Carter, and that is exactly why this channel exists. Subscribe, hit like, and drop your city in the comments below. Share this video with someone who deserves to know what you just learned. We are building something real here.